Someone asked me on social media about making a documentary to help prevent mass acts of violence and mass shootings. This is not something new that I'm working on. This is actually something that I've been working with for several decades. I wrote a book years ago on youth violence prevention and intervention. And I'm proud to say that that book did prevent some mass school shootings. The information contained within was followed. Students were aware of warning signs and indicators, as were the parents and teachers of the particular schools, and they took action, preventing several mass shootings, apprehending individuals and the weapons that they planned on using. When you look at the victims, it's not only the one shot, but let's take, for example, in Louisville, Kentucky. It's all of the families of not only the victims that were shot, but also of the other employees. The families have to know that family members are coming home from work. They have to know that when their family members leave for work, that they're coming home in the same safe manner in which they left. When people are sending their kids to school, they shouldn't be worried about whether or not they're going to make it through to lunch or the final bell and get on the bus and make it home or get picked up. When people cannot even take the time to read a simple book that's free, not even to buy the book, but to get a free copy of the book, to learn about warning signs, indicators, prevention and intervention, the easy things that people can do. And if you go back and look at the mass acts of violence, especially school shootings, in the last 20 years, almost every one of them, you can look back in hindsight and say, yes, all of the warning signs were there. But people didn't know what the warning signs were. They didn't know what to do to take action. And that is why we still are seeing the same things over and over and over. And let me tell you this. I take this subject very seriously because when I was a young adult, several friends of mine and I came out of a nightclub. A drunk driver got into a vehicle, backed into our designated driver's vehicle. He took off down the street and was going around a car lot that was there. And we went across the street, or across the lot, to try to get the plate number of the vehicle as he was fleeing. And he saw us. He turned the vehicle, accelerated towards us. Myself and another friend were able to get out of the way, but the third person that was with us was struck by the front of the pickup truck. And to this day, it still seems like slow motion, as he stuck to the front of the pickup truck and then slowly slid down and under the tires as the pickup truck and the driver continued to accelerate. The back tires kicked him up into the air and he came down on his head. I did CPR. I stopped the bleeding, or at least put pressure on the wounds. To this day, I still can taste the blood that got in my mouth at that time. I had to phone my friend's parents. They were in Ontario, we were in Vancouver, and tell them that Alex may not make it through the night, that they need to get the next plane to Vancouver. Although I did get his heart beating and his breathing restarted, it wasn't enough. The extensive head injuries took his life several days later. And that's something that you live with. and something that you remember and something that you have nightmares about, no matter how many years go by. The individual was sentenced to 2.5 years. 2 years for taking a life and 6 months for leaving the scene. That is why it is so important that people learn how to prevent these mass acts of violence, and why ProPix Canada Media, my company, is producing a docu-series to bring this information, to update it, to bring it current, and to bring it to the streaming services absolutely free of charge. We will give it away free to any streaming service, any platform, any television station around the world that wants to air it. It'll be in 4K broadcast quality, and they can have it for free to air. We just ask that the most people that can get access to it do, and that you as a viewer make sure that you watch it. The life you save, the mass act of violence that you prevent, could involve your own family members or your friends or yourself. And so it's important to make sure that you take action and don't sit by silently saying we should have done more, we could have done more. And the funny thing is that these simple bits of information could have prevented almost all of these mass shootings, and it didn't involve gun control and restricting automatic weapons and machine guns and assault rifles. And don't get me wrong, I'm totally for that. I'm totally for restricting access to weapons for people who shouldn't have them, or weapons that just don't make sense for people to own personally. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not out to ban guns, to take away your rights to recreational use, to go out to the target range with your friends, and hunting for those that hunt. And it's not about that. It's about making compromise to keep our children and our communities and loved ones safe. A few years ago, I had stopped in Ontario on a trip from Montreal to Vancouver to Montreal and then returned. But I stopped to see an uncle of mine that I had not seen in about 9-10 years, something like that. We talked on the phone and such, but we hadn't seen each other. So I decided that since I was in the area, I would stop in and surprise him. We set it all up with his friend to have him at her home. And I showed up and surprised him with a visit, and he just about cried. He had tears in his eyes. He just couldn't believe it. It was just such an amazing time that I cherish. Because a week later, he was brutally and viciously murdered in Ontario. And I mean a very violent death. And I hold on to the memories of that special visit a week before. I don't wish that on anyone. So I encourage you to get involved, to get educated on ways to prevent and act prior to these incidents of mass violence, instead of waiting till afterwards and saying, oh, well, yeah, I noticed that, but I didn't know what to do, or I didn't realize that those were all the warning signs to start with. Check out www.propixcanada.com. That's propixcanada.com. You can find out about the docu-series that's in production, in development and going to production in the near future. We've got to do better, folks. I don't care if you're like me in Canada, others in the States, over in Europe. It doesn't matter where you're at. One life lost that could have been prevented is one too many. Arm yourself with information. That's what it's all about, folks. Stay safe, take care, and make sure you hug those around you that you love, because you just never know what the next hour, the next day, the next week, you never know what it's going to bring. So stay safe and make sure you take time to appreciate those around you while they're still around you.